Welcome back to the Daytona International Speedway, as you're just moments away from Fast 6 qualifying for the 2025 Firecracker 400. Now take a look at the Fast 6 format. It's very similar to last year's. The top 3 finishers of each duel race will compete for the Firecracker 400 pole in set rows 1 to 3, with the notable exception being Jordan Forbes, who finished second in duel number 1, but because he went to a backup car after wrecking during Wednesday's practice, he will start from the rear in the summer's biggest race and thus was not eligible to contend for the Fast 6. But anyways, as for the drivers that were eligible for the Fast 6, they were each run 3 single car laps, with the average 3-lap speed being used to determine the starting spots. Now, in the event of a tie, if 2 drivers or multiple drivers have the exact same 3-lap average speed, the tiebreaker will be their points position in the Palm Summer League standings. And just as a reminder, no points will be awarded here. The duel is already awarded the points the previous day. Now, taking a quick look at the weather here today in Daytona, it's a clear 83 degrees Fahrenheit with 7 miles per hour towards the southwest. And finally, for all the drivers here today in the Fast 6, points leader Brendan Beal in the 37 will go first, followed by his teammate Brad Ream in the 6, the 01 Daniel Voiles, the 17 of Joe T, the 97 of Nathan Stapleton, and finally Jason Albert in the 4. Well, with all that out of the way, it is now officially time to get this Fast 6 started. Now, of course, kicking things off is your current points leader and the 2023 Palm Summer League champion of Brendan Beal in the 37, and sponsored by JetBlue and the New York Fire Department. Now, as previously mentioned, of course, Beal not only teamed this race as the points leader, but also won his duel, that being duel number 1 from the pole. He managed to add 3 additional points to his points lead, extending his points count so far this year to 110 points. Now, despite Beal being a former Palm Summer League champion, Beal has actually yet to win a Palm Summer League race. And the last time Beal has won anything on the channel was another Crown Jewel race, that being the Southern 500 in 2022 in the Old Golf Summer Series. But as for Beal's first lap here in Daytona, 180.415. Now, I will say the speeds for this year for Fast 6 will be noticeably slower compared to last year, since, of course, this year we have the varied random ratings, as well as the fact that the wind speed from last year's Fast 6 was double the speed for this year. As mentioned, the wind speed for this year is only 7 miles per hour. Last year was double that at 14 miles per hour. As Beal continues his second lap, coming off turns 3 and 4. Let's see what his second time will be here. .181.672, putting his average speed up to 180.432. Let's see what he does here on lap number 3. And speaking of 3, that's the number of top 10s Brendan Beal has to start the Palm Summer League season, even though he doesn't have a single top 5 so far this year. He's the only driver so far in the Palm Summer League season to finish inside the top 10 in all 3 races so far. And the driver 37 is starting looking to continue that momentum here in the summer's biggest race. And as Beal continues his final lap through turns 3 and 4 this time by, we're going to see what the 2023 Series Champions time will be for all 3 laps. Last time by, 181.719, putting his average up to 181.269. And we're going to see how that time will hold compared to the other drivers in this Fast 6 as the session continues to go on. Next up is Beal's teammate and car owner Brad Ream in the 6, who's sponsored by Carolina Railroad and Mopar for the 30th in a row here in the summer's biggest race. Of course, Bradley was the fastest driver during Wednesday night practice. However, during Thursday afternoon practice, Bradley was 18th fastest. Now, it's also kind of contrary to, despite Beal and Bradley being teammates, of course, Beal I mentioned already multiple times, is the points leader going into the Firecracker 400. Bradley Ream going into this race is dead last in points, all the way down in 40th, but they managed to earn a single point in his duel race, that being duel number 2. But anyways, as Brad Ream comes off turns 3 and 4, Brado's going to complete his first lap of the day. We'll see how it's going to be. 180.430, faster than Brendan Beal, so far looking pretty good for the driver of the 6. Now, of course, Brado is a driver that has ran every single Firecracker we've ran on this channel up until this point, as his finishes consist of 13th, 19th, 37th, 32nd, and finally 30th during last year's edition. And now coming off turn number 4 once again, we're going to see where Bradley's lap number 2 average is going to be. .181.675, again faster than his teammate Brendan Beal, although it's not by much, putting Bradley's average speed up to 181.052. Now, of course, with Bradley being all the way back in points, of course, his finishing results so far this summer have not really been the best. He finishes at 39th, 37th, and finally 31st during our first 2 races this summer. Now, even though Bradley and that 6 team has struggled when it comes to finishing results so far this summer, that team has at least gotten really good starting positions. As during our first 2 races this summer, the 6 team has started second, and first. And of course, with Bradley being this fast 6, there's a pretty good chance the 6 team could start their 4th straight race on the front row. But I'm going to see this lap 3 average is 181.763, putting Bradley's 3-lap average to 181.289. Much faster than his team, several tenths faster than his teammate Brendan Beal. So as things stand right now, Bradley's on the pole for the 400. But of course, there's still 4 drivers remaining, with the next being Daniel Voiles in the 01. Now, originally, this spot would have been occupied by defending Firecracker winner and defending series champion Jordan Forbes, but as previously mentioned earlier, Forbes had to go to a backup after crashing his primary on Wednesday night's practice. And because of that, Forbes wasn't eligible to contend for the Fast 6 here today. So instead, the next closest driver to him in duel number 1 was moved up. So in this case being Daniel Voiles, who finished 4th in duel number 1 yesterday. Now, I talked about how Reem was winning this race last in points and 40th. Voiles came this race second to last in points and 39th, with only 36 points so far this summer, after finishes the 21st, dead last in Japan after DNFing. And finally, at our last race at Minnesota, Voiles finished 35th, and if this was last year's PSL, that would have been considered last place. But now as Voiles comes back to the line to complete lap number 1, let's see what his time is going to be, 180.448. So far, the quickest out of any of our first lap averages thus far, so far things are looking really good for the driver of the 01. Now, Voiles has competed in every single Firecracker under the PSL name, including a run-up finish in 2023, losing out to Nick Sant. However, during last year's Firecracker, Voiles ended up finishing 25th, as he was involved during that race's second big wreck that happened around this corner in turns 3 and 4. Coming off turns 3 and 4 once again, we're going to see if Voiles can improve on his impressive average for lap number 1. We'll see what lap number 2 is going to be. 181.83, again, so far the fastest out of our 2 drivers that have qualified thus far, putting Voiles' average time to 181.065. And if Voiles continues at this rate he's going, he could knock the Railfan drivers out of the front row. And honestly, it's kind of surprising to see how fast his 01 car really is, as during our first 2 practices for Firecracker Week, Voiles was, during our first practice, he was 14th fastest, while during Thursday's practice, he was 39th fastest. But that team definitely did something in that car before these duels and before today's Fast 6. We're going to see if he's got the Railfan cars out of this front row as we come off turns 3 and 4 for the final time. And now back to the start-finish line. Will he knock the Railfan drivers out of the front row? He will! Lap 3 average of 181.763, bringing him to a total average of 181.298. A very impressive run for Daniel Voiles, as he's now on top of the board. But of course, we're just halfway done with Fast 6 here in Daytona, with our next driver up being the only Toyota in this Fast 6, that being Joe Team the 17, sponsored by Harbor Freight. Of course, Joe T is one of the very few single car owner drivers in the Palm Summer League, and has more or less been like that for most of his career here on the channel. And dating back to his first Firecracker start in 2021, his finishes consist of 8th, 7th, 18th, and 26th, that being his only DNF so far here in Daytona. So, besides last year, all in all, pretty decent results for Joe T here in the World Center of Racing. Now, as Joe T comes to complete his first lap of his Fast 6 session, we're going to see what his time is going to be. 180.437, not as fast as Royals, but faster than both the Railfan drivers. So far, not too bad for the 17. Now, as we go on board with Joe T, do turns 1 and 2 here, continuing down the back straightaway. And even though Joe T only has a single win on the channel so far, it did come from a super speedway, that being the 2022 edition of the M&M's Classic up in Connecticut during the old HRL. So Joe T definitely has experience of getting around at these super speedways, particularly during a green-white checkered finish. And now as for Joe T's second lap here. Oh, 181.661, the slowest lap 2 average of all 4 drivers I've qualified thus far. But in Joe T's total average so far to 181.049. And yeah, that was not a good second lap whatsoever. And that's definitely going to eliminate any chance of Joe T being on the front row here. But still, that isn't to say Joe T won't be a contender for the summer's biggest race. He came this race 7th in points and actually led the most laps during our last Super Speedway race at Armory Digital, and also our last race we raced at Minnesota. Joe T is the only driver so far this summer to lead the most laps in 2 races so far, despite not winning. And now coming off turns 3 and 4 for the final time, and coming back to the tri-oval, we're going to see what Joe T's third lap will be. 181.752, faster than Brendan Beals, but still slower than either Ream of Royals, putting Joe T's total average to 181.283, putting him third on the board so far. Now, of course, Joe T still has at least a chance of starting on the inside in this top 3 for the Firecracker 400, but there's still, of course, 2 drivers remaining. The next one up being Nathan Stapleton in the 97, once again sponsored by Powerade and JBL. Now, going into the day, Staple actually moved up 3 positions in points, up to 27th in points, after he finished second in duel number 2, earned 2 points as a result. So Staple is definitely one of those drivers towards the back half in points who did very well when it came to earning points in this duel race. Now, even though Staple does have a win on the channel that came back in 2022 at Papyrus, he's probably best known for coming up just short against Jordan Stout at Armory Digital, also in 2022, by just 2 1,000ths of a second, which was the closest finish in channel history, at least for a points-paying race, until that was unseated by last year's Firecracker of 1 1,000th of a second. But now Staple coming to complete his first lap here in the Fast 6, so we'll see what his lap 1 average will be. 180.426, basically right in the middle of the pack when it comes to lap 1 averages so far. But of course, Staple still has 2 more opportunities to improve his total average. Now, of course, Staple has competed in every single Firecracker since his first race on the channel back in 2022, with finishes of 10th, 30th, and 11th. So I guess a go big or go home mentality for that 97 team here in the World Center of Racing. But if you recall, during the last 2 Firecrackers, Staple forced to field 4 wide both during last year's Firecracker and 2023, with that latter race being the catalyst of that year's big one. But we're going to see coming to lap number 2 what Staple's average is going to be. Whoa, 181.741, easily the fastest lap 2 average so far. And in fact, the only lap 2 average at anyone so far that's above 6/10. So things looking really good for Staple with his total average of 181.083. Can he have a third lap good enough to knock Royals off the pole? Now, just like with Royals, if you look at Staple's practice speeds, I'm kind of surprised Staple is even up here when it comes to speeds, as he was 39th fastest during Wednesday night and 26th fastest during Thursday's practice session, but now Staple has a good chance to knock Voiles off the pole, coming to the start-finish line, where he knocked the 0-1 off the pole. He does by 1/1000th of a mile. Nathan Stapleton on top of the board here at Daytona, with a total average of 181.299. Wow. What a run for Nathan Stapleton. But I wouldn't start celebrating too early for the 97 team right now, as there's still one more driver remaining, that being the 4-car and duel number 2 winner, Jason Albert in the 4. Now, there's actually the second Firecracker in a row that Albert's ran this particular paint scheme. So this time sponsored by Black Rifle Coffee, Ranger Boats, in addition to his primary sponsor, Buffalo Wild Wings. Now, of course, despite Albert winning his duel race yesterday and getting 3 bonus points from that, when it came to practice, that 4-car was all over the place. As during Wednesday night, there was 17th fastest, but on Thursday afternoon, Albert was by far the slowest driver during that session. In fact, was the only driver on Thursday that had speeds below 188 miles per hour, despite, of course, the opportunities that you have to run in a pack during practice sessions. But as for Albert's lap 1 average here today, 180.412. Easily the slowest lap 1 average so far compared to any of our drivers, even slower than Brendan Beals. Now, much like the 2 Railfan teammates of Ream and Beal, Albert's another driver who's contended in every single Firecracker we've had up until this point, where finishes in 19th, 12th, and 9th under the old Golf Summer Series. However, under the PSL banner, Albert hasn't been nearly as lucky, as in 2023 he finished 33rd dead last after flipping in that race. And during last year's Firecracker, Albert was 23rd as the first car 1 lap down. But now off of 4 and coming to the Tri-Oval, let's see what Albert's second lap average will be. 181.690. That's actually the best second lap average out of anyone, besides, of course, Staples' monstrous 181.741. So if Albert can put up just a solid enough third lap, Albert could at least get a top 4 starting position on the second row. Now, as for Albert's finishes so far here in the PSL, he kicked off the summer with 2 straight 36th place finishes. Of course, at Armored Digital, he's involved in a lone wreck in that race, while in Motegi in Japan, who was actually one of the few drivers who got caught 2 laps down after that poorly timed after that caution. However, during a last race at Minnesota, Albert finished 5th, and I'm happy to say now that Albert is a Fillmore Channel winner after he, of course, won our final winter race at Papyrus earlier this year. But now, coming off turn 4 and coming back to Tri-Oval for the final time here today, we're going to see what Albert's lap number 3 average is going to be. 181.741, actually the exact same time from Staples' second lap average. But sadly, that's not going to be enough for Albert to be inside the top 2 rows. And we'll start 5th during the summer's biggest race on Friday. And speaking of which, with Fast 6 qualifying now complete, that means Nathan Stapleton in 97 will be a pole sitter for the 2025 Firecracker 400, beating out Daniel Voiles by just 1/1000th of a mile. Again, that 1/1000th of a number comes up here in Daytona, as of course 1/1000th of a second was the difference between Forbes and Random during last year's photo finish. But of course, a huge congratulations to Nathan Stapleton and NS Racing, as well as Daniel Voiles and Ford Kennington Motorsports, as they are your front row starters for the 2025 edition of the Firecracker 400. But anyways, let's wrap up this Fast 6 qualifying session as we take a look at our first 3 rows of the 2025 edition of the summer's biggest race. So of course, as previously mentioned, on the pole is the 97 of Nathan Stapleton, followed by the 01 of Daniel Voiles, and of course Staple beats out Voiles for the pole by just 1/1000th of a mile. And it's interesting to note too that even though Staple beat Voiles just barely, Voiles actually had a faster lap 1 and lap 3 average time. But it's because the Staple is monstrous, 181.741, easily the fastest lap 2 speed out of any driver here today, Staple was just barely able to squeak the pole away from Daniel Voiles. You know, on row number 2, we have the 6 of Bradley Ream and the 17 of Joe T. It's actually going to mark Bradley's first time this summer where he's going to start outside the front row. It's actually also going to be Bradley's worst start so far this year, which is 3rd place, which is still better than most starting spots on the grid. So still another good effort when it comes to qualifying for the 6th team here in 2025. And finally, row number 3 consists of both your dual winners, that being Jason Albert in the 4, and current points leader and former series champion Brendan Beal in the 37. So Beal definitely didn't have a good qualifying ever whatsoever, but still, a 6th place starting spot, in addition to his dual points, is still better than most drivers here in the grid. So, of course, to wrap up Firecracker Week is the 2025 running of the summer's biggest race, that being the Firecracker 400 on the night of 4th of July at 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, barring any delays. So, that for a race you do not want to miss. Many big storylines there. The Firecracker's always been an exciting race every single time we've ran it, and this year's edition should be no exception. But as always, y'all, thank you guys for watching this session. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys during the Firecracker.